Green MP Tamatha Paul under attack from the coalition.
She is totally wrong and the Greens are in la-la land on law and order. Really, I could say lots of things, but it's just weird, to be honest.
Our view is that we're not for anarchy.
But the representative of Wellington Central is not backing down.
I'm not surprised that people are upset that a young brown woman is being critical of an institution that has let her and her communities down for a very long time.
Kia ora, ko Lillian Hanly ahau, anei te pūrongo tōranga pū mō tēnei wiki. Welcome to Focus on Politics. Elections are won and lost in the middle, and law and order is a key battleground for most parties.
New Zealanders, Kiwis, New Zealanders.
But who are these so-called middle New Zealanders, and what does the evidence say? Tamatha Paul is the Green Party Justice spokesperson and its voice on all matters police. She's come under fire this week for comments made on a recent university panel which explored alternatives to policing. She said she'd received complaints about police beat patrols across the country and that for some, they made people feel less safe. She also said police walk around waiting for homeless people to leave their spot before packing their stuff up and throwing it in the bin. Cue outrage.
No disrespect, she is totally wrong and the Greens are in la-la land on law and order. New Zealanders want to feel safe in their homes, their businesses, their communities. Our police are doing an excellent job. They're backed up by this government and I really want them to be recognised as such. And beating up on our police and accusing them of all sorts of things, she is on a completely different planet from where New Zealanders are at.
Standing by her comments, Tamatha Paul explained them further to RNZ's Craig McCulloch.
They're entitled to their own views, but mine are that police resources should go into much more productive uses of their time than walking around and packing up homeless people's stuff and chucking it in the bin. And that has been the feedback that I've received as the local MP here in Wellington.
Who from?
DCM, Salvation Army, other concerned members of the public. I had group members of the public who wanted me to write to the Minister and ask that police resources were placed elsewhere, aside from the beat patrols.
Labor has said that you're undermining confidence in the police through comments like that, and it's irresponsible.
Yeah, Labor's entitled to their own views. Mine are that police are not well trained to do a lot of the jobs that they're doing. We've seen that in the last week with an 11-year-old autistic girl being detained and drugged. We've also seen it with the use of force against a man in Orere Point who lost his life. I don't know why it's so confronting for some people to actually see a bit of criticism of the police and the way that they exercise their massive powers.
If you're going to get a change in government, you're going to have to work with the Labour Party. Do comments like yours make a change of government less likely, turning off or scaring away some middle voters?
Well, it's not just that I have to work with other political parties, it's that I have to work with the police themselves. So when people come to me with issues, they've been assaulted in town or they've been trying to get the police to give their attention to their issue, then I have to work with the police on that. I've been working with the police to make sure that they've got better responses to people who have been victims of stalking. There's been lots of times where I've worked with police. I worked with the police recently around the Pride Hikoi, making sure that Destiny Church protesters didn't come in and make things more unsafe. So I can work with the police and can work with other political parties, but the reason we have other political parties is so that different views can be expressed, and this is one that many hold.
Do you resile from any of your comments?
Why would I?
So that's a no.
Well, I don't think I need to, because they are based on legitimate experiences of people that I'm supposed to represent.
What is the Green Party's position on defunding the police or abolishing the police?
The policy that the party has is around breaking down systemic discrimination and racism within the police. And we have lots of policies around incomes, education, healthcare, all of the things that help to deter crime from happening in the first place. So we don't have a comprehensive police policy. That's because we see them as bottom of the cliff, and we think if you can break down poverty, that's going to eliminate a lot of crime that we see in our communities.
Have you got ahead of yourself then in making public comments around possible alternatives?
No, because I make comments about lots of different things. It's just that this one got picked up because it's controversial and because people want to have a crack. But I do a lot of commentary around health and other alternatives to our justice system, particularly in the youth justice space. But I'm not surprised that people are upset that a young brown woman is being critical of an institution that has let her and her communities down for a very long time. I think that's a really important mechanism for the enormous amount of power that they have, that somebody is actually asking them questions on whether they're capable of dealing with the issues that they've been assigned to dealing with or not. And my view is they are not the best people to be responding to instances where people are in mental distress, in drug psychosis, those high-level situations that require specialist response. That's not your average police officer.
Have you been surprised by the response?
Not really. I know that it's not a commonly held view within this Parliament, and that's okay. I'm all right with that.
Within Parliament, it wasn't a common held view. Here's New Zealand First's Winston Peters.
I just hope by the time she's 30, she's grown up and far more responsible. But it demonstrates that students' politics, which she was at the centre of in Victoria University, is no background for this tough job.
Even potential coalition partner to the Greens, Labour's Chris Hipkins, came out swinging.
I thought that Tamatha Paul's comments were ill-informed, were unwise, in fact were stupid. I don't think that responsible members of Parliament should be undermining the police in that way. I think the New Zealand public have huge confidence in the New Zealand police, and they should have confidence in the New Zealand police. I thought her suggestion that people feel more comfortable when there's a gang member on the streets than when there's a police officer on the streets were totally out of touch. And I think that she should apologise for that, actually. I don't think that's what responsible members of Parliament should be saying.
He's misattributing those comments. They were actually made by another Green MP, Kahurangi Carter. But when it comes to the issue of police resourcing Tamatha Paul is trying to raise, Chris Hipkins is more sympathetic.
It cannot be an either-or. Of course we want to see our police attending domestic violence call-outs. Of course we want to see a much greater focus on preventing violent crime, and that does include violent crime that happens in the home. We know that there is a cycle of victimisation that we have to break as a country if we want to decrease violent crime in New Zealand. But undermining confidence in the police by saying that people don't feel safe when they see police walking around on the footpath is not the way of having that discussion.
Also weighing in is National's Justice spokesperson and Justice Minister Paul Goldsmith on Instagram.
And more rubbish from Labour's mates, the Green Party. We have the Greens, police and corrections spokesperson spinning absolute nonsense. She thinks most offenders are non-violent. This comes a few weeks after she spread more nonsense on her TikTok that the vast majority of people in prison are there for non-violent offences, that they've had to do as a response to poverty. Now here's the truth. More than half of prisoners are there for homicide, sexual assault, acts intended to cause injury, and unlawful entry with intent, which is burglary.
Here's Paul Goldsmith on Thursday.
It's rich and ironic that Chris Hipkins is calling Tamatha Paul stupid for the law and order approach. But, fundamentally Labor and Greens are in lockstep when it comes to their voting record. Labor voted against the gang laws to give us the tools to deal with gangs, give the police extra tools. They voted against the sentencing reforms, which is about tougher consequences for crime. They voted against the three strikes legislation. All those things are lockstep with the Greens. But when that kind of approach is articulated as boldly as it is by Tamatha Paul, then they try and distance themselves from it. And I don't think you can have it both ways.
That was Chris Hipkins trying to distance himself, and I guess you could say that National is also guilty of politicking when it comes to law and order, or making your specific party stance clear.
No. I mean, I think we've been consistent around wanting to restore law and order and restore real consequences for crime. And I think my challenge, I suppose, to the Labor Party is to be clear about it. What is your approach? Fundamentally, in government, they were about reducing the prison population regardless of what was going on in the community. They vote continually against everything we do to toughen things up, and yet at other times, they criticise the Greens for doing exactly the same thing, so I can't make it out.
Chris Hipkins was at the field days and didn't take up RNZ's invitation to respond. But Justice spokesperson Ginny Anderson says any finer details around coalition agreements would be worked out closer to an election.
We voted a lot against National's legislation because they don't break the cycle of crime. The changes they've introduced have still seen 607 more gang members under their watch, a 96% increase of methamphetamine in New Zealand, and just 13 more police officers. All the things they're boasting about that helps don't actually do anything to reduce crime and to make our communities safer.
So in terms of his critique that you are still aligned with the Greens, though. What do you say to that?
We share lots of views with them on lots of different areas, but on this particular one of police presence and funding the police, we believe it's important that we have a well-funded police service. And in fact, Labour increased investment in New Zealand Police by 50%, whereas under National they've cut 200 roles in support staff and they reduced their overall budget. On this particular issue in regarding to funding the police and police presence in community, we thought it was important to make a distinction between Labour and the Greens. We've always funded the police and we believe they have a very important role to play in our communities.
The day after the news broke, Tamatha Paul spoke to Morning Report.
It is a polarising issue. There are people who have been writing to me saying, yes, I do feel intimidated by seeing more police officers around town. And there are other views as well, people that it does make them feel safe. And I think it is a contextual one. It depends on who you are, I guess, your interactions that you've had with the police. And I think it is important that there is somebody in this parliament that is critical of police and the way that they discharge their significant power.
But is taking police off the beat the right way to deal with that? Are there not other ways to try and restore that trust and improve policing? Do you need to take police off the beat because there are other sections of the community, obviously, that are concerned about crime rates?
I'm saying that there's other people that can do that job as well.
I understand that, but there's a deterrent element as well with police on the beat, right?
I think we'd have to look at that evidence and whether that is the case or not. But from what I am hearing, it is making people feel more unsettled because of that presence. I don't think it's controversial at all that someone would be critical of the police. And I know that because of the feedback that I've had over the last 24 hours of people saying, yes, actually, I don't feel safe around the police. I don't have trust for the police because of my interactions that I have had with them. And that's a valid view that should be held in this parliament if we truly represent everybody.
The Prime Minister fired up and making it personal.
Oh, she can say what she likes, but she's totally insane. And the Green Party are in complete la-la land. Well, I'm just telling you what I think. And what I think is I also represent New Zealanders, and I don't think that's the view of New Zealanders.
There's that phrase again. New Zealanders.
New Zealanders want to feel safe in their homes, their businesses, their communities. Our police are doing an excellent job.
I totally reject that. Most Kiwis actually really appreciate the fact that our police are highly visible.
Police, who are the only thing between a lot of vulnerable New Zealanders and violence.
Here's Tamatha Paul's take on the Coalition's framing of New Zealanders.
I've had a massive response from people saying that they feel the same way about police, and so it might not be the majority of views, but it's still a significant view that should be represented in this parliament.
What do you think the Prime Minister's saying when he says that?
Well, I think the Prime Minister is extremely privileged. He hasn't had the same upbringing as I have. He hasn't been over-policed like I have in a community like Tokoroa, where we interact with the police regularly. So, of course, he has a different experience. He's extremely privileged.
She's also received further criticism for her broader comments around low-level crimes that have resulted in people being imprisoned and a lack of evidence to back them up.
I guess I just take people's word for it when they come and talk to me as a Member of Parliament.
Politically, it is easier to make a case when there's evidence to back up the statements being made. But on attitudes toward police, what does the evidence actually say? This very week, a Justice Select Committee report, based on hearings from the annual review of police at the end of last year, stated public trust in the police is at about 68%. That's certainly not everybody. Also last year, a report titled Understanding Police Delivery, commissioned in 2020 by the police, was released. It looked at whether bias existed in New Zealand policing and how police could ensure people are treated fairly. The 2-year investigation found Māori men are more likely to be stopped, prosecuted and tasered due to bias and structural racism within the police.
Findings indicate a number of unsatisfactory and inequitable experiences of police by Māori. These include high levels of taser deployment, complaints about use of force and warrantless searches. As well as feeling unfairly treated, Māori voiced dissatisfaction about the impact police interactions in their homes had on children, feeling unsafe with police and frustration at inappropriate police responses to family harm incidents. The research also indicates a concern about the cultural knowledge and skill of some officers when interacting with Māori. 42% of taser deployments and 54% of all taser discharge events between July 1st and December 31st, 2022 were noted as involving those experiencing mental distress and who were mentally unwell and/or attempting self-harm or suicide. Analysis of the reports completed by police officers after such incidents indicated a belief that individuals experiencing distress were non-compliant rather than unwell or unable to follow instructions. How police officers conduct themselves has an impact on how the public views the experience and, in turn, influences their trust and confidence in the police.
And what about Police Minister Mark Mitchell's comments about crime reduction?
Do you have evidence that the increased police patrols have reduced crime?
Yes, we've seen if we go through, for example, the Wellington CBD, when comparing 24 to 23, we've seen a 5.5% decrease in violent crime. In Christchurch, we've seen a 4.7% decrease, and in the Auckland CBD, we've seen 11.5% decrease in violent crime.
Mr Mitchell explained the way he selected his data was to compare the areas where beat patrols roam from last year to the previous year when those beat patrols weren't there. The government has also been celebrating a general drop in violent crime, as announced in a press release at the end of last month. Backing up this claim with a link to a non-government social media account the government says used official police data. RNZ reported in response to the announcement the police data used differed to that of the Ministry of Justice data from the Crime and Victims Survey. That information showed rates of violent offences have stayed mostly steady. That same data is used to track how the government is doing against its violent crime target, not a social media account. That's Focus on Politics for this week. I'm Lillian Hanly. Thanks for joining us. Mā te wā.